48 hours away from their latest road test in Nashville, Seattle may or may not have several key starters on tap on the offensive side of the football. We're going to be diving into the latest injury report, including the status of Grey Zabel, coming up next year on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined here on Blue Friday by my co-host Nick Lee, and a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in, whether you're in Moses Lake, Washington, or listening from Dallas, Texas. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week and helping Locked On Podcast Network be the #1 sports podcast network. Seahawks gearing up for their next road challenge in Nashville, the 1-9 Titans. Plenty of injuries to break down heading into this game. A lot of questions still remaining for Seattle on that front. We've got our game plan for victory, as we do each and every week. Picks to click, predictions, and much more coming your way, courtesy of our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Now for your lead story here on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. On their final injury report, the Seahawks still have plenty of question marks for players specifically listed as questionable. The biggest surprise on that list being running back Ken Walker III, who actually had not even been on the injury report at one time this entire season until today. Cropped up with a glute injury. The good news on that front is Mike McDonald said he should be fine and that this was more precautionary. So we can kind of throw that one to the wind. I think it sounds pretty much like he's going to play in this game. And you know what? It's better be safe than sorry when it comes to being accurate with injury reports. They took it easy on him today. So Ken Walker III, I would expect, is going to play. Where the real questions lie, Nick, the biggest one is still Grey Zabel. And it's crazy that we're even having this discussion because when that injury happened last week in LA, I'm just going to be honest with you, it looked like a classic torn ACL play to me, where a guy's leg gets caught underneath a teammate in the line of scrimmage, knee buckles, they're down on the ground grabbing the knee. He had to have help getting off the field. And yet here we were on Thursday and Friday, and he was limited at practice and doing things on the practice field. Mike McDonald said that he looked good. So now he is a game time decision for the game. No significant injuries shown on the scans. So I guess that's the interesting topic to discuss here. I wrote about this in Emerald City Spectrum on Thursday, that I think this creates a little bit of a conundrum because I know fans are going to be thinking 1-9 Tennessee. Like, if there's any question about his health, don't play him. But you have to always look at the opponent you're playing, and the biggest strength for Tennessee is that defensive line in the interior. And I guess my viewpoint is, if this was not a significant injury, if you didn't have an MCL sprain or anything going on with your ACL and it was just a bruise or whatever, if he's healthy enough that he's been able to practice the last few days and the medical staff says, look, there's no harm, there's no foul for him, re-aggravating this or making it worse, then I don't see any reason why you wouldn't be playing him in this football game.
Yeah, just give him a couple Busch Lights. He'll be okay. He just strikes me as one of those guys. Because certainly the prospect of Christian Haynes against Jeffrey Simmons and company kind of sends shivers down my spine a little bit. Because we were talking before the show, and one way for this game to kind of go sideways is if Jeffrey Simmons plays the role of Miley Cyrus and comes in like a wrecking ball. And the Seahawks cannot afford that. So, because he is the definition of a game wrecker, he really is like their main, player that teams kind of scheme around. And even then, I was reading a stat that he still gets a high amount of pass rushing success, even facing double teams. So, having all your horses in the stable for your interior line, well, you don't because of some other injuries. But Grey Zabel is a hugely important. And you don't want to take any chances. We talked about this a couple weeks ago when they were playing the Cardinals. And like, okay, yeah, can you rest some guys that might play if this is a playoff game? Sure. This is the time of year you can't take any win for granted. The Titans only just lost to the Texans, who beat up on the Bills by 3 points. So you can't take anything for granted in the NFL. So having Grey Zabel play would be a huge boost. I mean, that's very, very obvious. Another one, of course, is the linebacker situation. Out Tyrese Knight. We knew that with a concussion. Ernest Jones seems like a bit of a coin flip, hoping that there's some optimism there in the undertones of Mike McDonald's presser. Because otherwise, if it's both Jones and Knight being out, you got the Drake Thomas and maybe Patrick O'Connell show. Actually kind of sounds like a fun talk show. The Patrick O'Connell, I don't know, maybe he has that good talk show name or something. And so that is a huge kind of question mark too, is the whole linebacker position. And again, it's the Titans. I know that they have their weaknesses. They're not a great football team, but you miss enough guys, and then all of a sudden you miss enough assignments because other guys aren't on the same page or aren't as ready to play. Things can get a little hairy. So if guys are healthy, I think this is the time of year you just got to play them.
Yeah, and I think, look at the linebacker situation. That's the one that I think is more pressing going into this game. If Zabel is not deemed healthy enough to play, look, you try to get by with Christian Haynes. I think there's some things you can do schematically to help the interior of your line there. We'll talk about that a little bit in the next segment. But the linebacker spot, like if you're already down Tyrese Knight, who we saw he played in Jones's absence a couple weeks ago against Arizona, you don't have him available. Patrick O'Connell's never started a game in the National Football League, and having him next to Drake Thomas, who's played really well, but Thomas has been playing next to Knight or Jones. Like he's going to be the guy with the green dot, and that changes everything in this game, even against an offense that has been one of the worst in the NFL. You'd be digging real deep in your depth to the point that I almost wonder if Jamie Sheriff is going to get called up from the practice squad too, because they don't have anybody else that can play that position. I mean, unless you're going to have Nick Eamon-Wari play there, which at this point, I don't doubt that he can go in there and play it, but there's some desperation there with the injuries that they have. I anticipate that Ernest Jones is going to play in this game, especially since he came out of the last game feeling pretty good. We'll see. Again, because the opponent, maybe Seattle decides to play cautious and make sure he's ready for the next week. But the hand might be pushed a little bit with the fact that Tyrese Knight is not available. And the depth is starting to get razor thin at that position. One other thing that I want to touch on real quick, Torrey Horton going to miss his third consecutive game with a shin injury. And this has been kind of a weird one because, you normally think about like a bruised shin, maybe you have to miss a game or whatever, but maybe there was a hairline fracture. I mean, the possibilities are now looking more towards something like that to be out this long, but they hadn't put him on injured reserve. So it seems like they're still holding this by a week-to-week thing. But that coincided with trading for Rashid Shaheed. I think that might have been a big reason that they went out and did that, because they knew that Torrey Horton was ailing. And so they're not going to have him at least for one more week. And maybe we'll see Jake Bobo back in the lineup this week. He's missed 3 straight games. He's not on the injury report at all, so maybe he'll be out there. But certainly Seattle's going to be missing that third speed component at receiver. Haven't gotten to see all 3 of those guys together yet in a game. JSN, Shaheed, and Torrey Horton. Won't get to see it this week either. But generally speaking, look, because of who the opponent is, if they're missing a bunch of these guys, if Robbie Utes isn't available for personal reasons, like they can sub in Brady Russell at fullback, they'll be fine. But you start having the injuries stack up, and it can level the playing field a little bit against a team that's 1-9 that desperately wants to win a game. It's not like Tennessee's wanting to lose games. Like these guys are going to be coming out wanting to play. So got to keep these injuries in mind. I personally expect to see Grey Zabel and Ernest Jones playing in this game. I expect both those guys are going to start, but we'll see. Game time decisions on both those guys leading up to Sunday in Nashville. When we come back, we've got weekly game plans to dish out. What do the Seahawks need to do to go to Tennessee and get the win as the heavy favorite in Nashville? We'll be breaking that all down coming up next year on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement of this sports season. Whether you're following the NFL, NBA, or both, there's no better time to jump into the action. If you haven't tried it yet, Prize Picks is the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere Prize Picks operates, including California, Texas, and Georgia. I like picking my favorite players, whether it's Patrick Mahomes or Steph Curry, to see how my predictions play out. And with the new stacks feature, it's an absolute game changer. You can pick more on Steph's points, threes, and assists in the same lineup. Plus, if one of your players leaves early with an injury, the injury reboot saves my lineup from a loss. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Welcome back to the Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm Corbin Smith. He's Nick Lee. A special thanks to each and every one of the 12s tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We appreciate the support of the podcast. The Seahawks looking to get back in the win column after that tough loss against the Rams last Sunday. And an ideal opponent, at least based on record. The Titans at 1-9, one of the worst teams in the National Football League. They're at the bottom of the league in pretty much every meaningful category on offense and defense. There haven't been a lot of positives for this team that fired Brian Callahan early in the season. They've had coaching turnover. They've had injuries galore on both sides of the football. It's been a rough season in Tennessee. But like we say every week, look, the saying any given Sunday, there's teeth to that. Like we see it every week that teams can beat anybody. And you have to show up and be ready to go. Same thing goes for the Seahawks in this game, especially playing on the road, Eastern time zone, 10 a.m. game. They've been really good in those with Mike McDonald as coach, but still, those are always challenging games. Let's get to our weekly game plan, the keys to victory on offense. And Nick, I think you look at this game from Seattle's perspective. Anytime that you're a heavy favorite like this, and I'm leaning back on the Cardinals game we had a few weeks ago, New Orleans as well. You got to get off to a fast start because you don't want Tennessee to start thinking that it has a chance to win this game or at least can hang. You don't want the Titans to linger around, squash the bug early, get that quick start, get up by a couple of scores, and don't look back. And they've done it several times against bad teams this year. Washington as well. They've been able to do this consistently. Can you do it on the road here again like you did against Washington? I think that is a critical component here. You just got to make it that the Titans don't have any reason to have hope in this game.
Right. Straight from the Cobra Kai dojo. Strike first, strike hard, no mercy. You just got to go up 2 scores in the first quarter. I don't know if it's 14-0, 10-0, 14-3, what have you. Just give them no hope because you see that in every level of any sport. A heavy favorite. You let them hang around in the third quarter, in the fourth quarter, and some weird things happen, like the Titans' lone win this year. Talk about weird things that's happened. That Cardinals game, my goodness, that was one of the weirdest games I've ever seen. But the Cardinals let them hang around, and that's what happens. So you can't let them hang around. Strike first, strike hard, no mercy in the first quarter. Just set the tone early, and not just with the score, and with your play, your physicality. And that comes with the run game. And I was looking at kind of the stats and where obviously things got away from the Seahawks offensively with the Rams. They're trailing. They're trying to come back. And I loved – so just looking at where things are between the Cardinals game and the Rams game. And what I'm saying is have at least 5 more rushing attempts than passing attempts because with the Rams, it was 44 passes and 35 rushes. That's quite a heavy load. But skewed too much to the passing side. Against the Cardinals was one of my favorites. It was 46 rushes and 12 pass attempts. My San Pasquale high school football coach, Tony Corley, shout out. He just retired, actually, after about 20 years. So shout out to him. Congratulations. We ran the triple option at San Pasquale. And that is a type of line that he would love to see. In fact, he would probably say that's 12 pass attempts too many. And that is kind of what I'm hoping this goes to is that they do lean more on the running game and certainly test the edges because Jeffrey Simmons can wreck anything. But getting back to that mentality of being on your toes and being the aggressor with the run game and having a significant amount more rushing attempts than passing attempts and just keeping that tempo up.
Yeah, the edge thing is a huge component in this game because going back and watching, even when Tennessee had Draymond Jones, the former Seahawk, before they traded him to Baltimore, this was a team that was having trouble defending the run off tackle, and it's been even worse since they made that trade. Arden Key is not a bad player, but he's an average starter at best. And then the depth behind him, they have very little at that edge position. I mean, they let Harold Landry go before this season. They have moved on from a number of players. They are dearth of talent and depth at those edge spots. Now, they can play some of their big-bodied guys. Jeffrey Simmons had a sack as a 2-point stance guy outside last week, but they're not going to be doing that with him a ton because then you don't have him playing inside. I think really testing, and I'm not even saying the boundary runs. I'm talking those off-tackle runs. I think Seattle can have some success, especially testing the linebackers and making them have to run a little bit. I think those edges can be really soft against this defense. And Ken Walker's going to play. Zach Charbonnet's going to play. Halani's going to be out there. I think all three of those guys can run well effectively on those type of plays, both in the zone and gap schemes. So I think that's really where you want to try to hammer that run game and get things going. You're not looking to have a 44-12 discrepancy, but you'd like to have the run game be more active than last week. And I don't get me wrong. I love games where you run the football like that, but I think they're still going to have opportunities to be able to really sling it on offense. And as far as I'm concerned, the other thing that has to happen in this game, for goodness sakes, no turnovers in your own territory. I'm not even going to go as far as saying no turnovers. We can say that every single week, but the Rams scored 2 of their touchdowns last week because they started way deep in Seattle territory, and they didn't have to go very far. The one, they had to go 3 yards. You can't give any team free passes, and I would say especially a team like the Titans that can't move the ball very well. If you give them some free passes where they only have to go 20 yards, even the worst NFL teams can score touchdowns in those situations. So I don't want Sam Darnold to suddenly become precautious to the point where he's not taking his shots downfield, but they have got to eliminate those turnovers in those situations, especially against a team like this where, again, if you can stomp them early and you don't have those turnovers to give them life and go get points, then I feel like you should be able to get that offense going and really humming in this football game. Let's switch gears now to the defensive side for the Seahawks, and they're going to be playing an offense. If you think Tennessee had a lot of no names on defense, wait till you get to the offense because Calvin Ridley's done for the season now with a fractured fibula. They're going to be missing Io Maynard, their rookie receiver out of Stanford. He's been ruled out with an injury. I mean, they're going to be playing a couple of practice squad guys at receiver for most of this game. They're going to be getting starter reps. And they already were struggling to move the ball through the air. The run game's been very hit and miss. The offensive line has been very hit and miss, particularly in pass protection where Cam Ward's been sacked more than anybody. And so that's really, to me, the biggest key for Seattle's defense. And I don't think they need to unload their entire playbook, but the disguising aspect pre and post snap, I think this is a game where really muddying up the reads and progressions for Cam Ward. He's already had issues when he's had his good receivers there. He doesn't have a lot of his weapons in this game. I think you muddy it up, you can force this rookie into a lot of mistakes.
Definitely. We made that baseball analogy last week with Matthew Stafford of kind of mixing your pitches a little bit, mixing your looks. And not that you can just afford to groove a fastball down the middle here, but you can trust your best stuff. And the defense can trust their best stuff. You have your fastball and your slider is better than whatever they got at the plate. And that can be with disguising. You can disguise pre and post snap without being crazy with different exotic looks. There's a way to do that. And also just like you said, they're down Alec Almanor, their receiver. I think I've said his name differently about 8 times. And they have Okonkwo, the tight end, who's going to be their main target. You take him away, they have just absolutely nothing. And another thing too is I saw a stat that the Cam Ward's taken at least 3 sacks in 5 straight games. And the Seahawks, even though they didn't get a sack against the Rams, they had 9 sacks in the 2 games before that. So you'd like to think that there's a little bit of momentum there for the Seahawks to notch a few sacks and maybe 5 combined sacks and tackles for loss, creating some havoc, because this is a game where the offensive line's a mess for the Titans. The Seahawks defense is bloodthirsty. It kind of reminds me, in Star Wars, that the trash compactor is closing in on Cam Ward, and he's desperately trying to hold up pieces of metal to keep the walls from closing in, because that's just kind of how his season has gone in Tennessee. I think he's he still could be a very fine player in the NFL. He's made some good moments, and but the Seahawks can certainly force him into making some mistakes and creating turnovers and sacks, and he's struggled holding on to the football when you hit him. More on that later with my possible pick to click. But he certainly is a guy where, the trash compactor is quickly closing in, and you got to seal the deal.
Yeah, and really those metal objects to try to keep the walls from closing in, those are going to be the running backs and the tight ends in the passing game, because they just really don't have anything on the outside right now. With Ridley being hurt, Manor being hurt, they are looking pretty shaky at that receiver position. Now, Gunnar Helm, their rookie tight end out of Texas, he actually leads the team with 2 receiving touchdowns. Cam Ward's only thrown 6 this year, so a third of those have gone to Gunnar Helm, the rookie duo. And so I look at that being the way that Tennessee maybe can try to get something going if they can get the intermediate passing game to their tight ends, get Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears out in space one-on-one, especially with Seattle's linebacker injury situation. That might be where they are able to get some things going. So for me, another key, if we're looking at a stat here, I'm not letting the running backs and tight ends murder me. I'm not letting them go over 75 yards. Like, I'm saying you one-on-one against our corners, whether you're receivers, I don't think you guys can do anything. We're going to put a little more emphasis on slowing down your running backs and tight ends. And if those guys aren't making anything happen, where does Cam Ward go? That is going to be a major problem for the rookie quarterback. So I think this is a game where you say, we trust our corners one-on-one to defend your receivers. We're going to shut down your other guys, and we're going to put your quarterback in a really bad spot. We're going to put him in a pickle. And I think if the Seahawks can do that, that's where those sacks for loss, they're going to start piling up in this game against a team that's given up a lot of those throughout the course of the season, both in the passing game and in the run game. Coming up next, we got our picks to click. We've got game predictions and much more coming your way here on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. The NFL season is now heading into week 12, and there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team, hopefully in the midst of a playoff race. But let's be honest, getting tickets, it can be an absolute pain, whether it's login screens, prices jumping at checkout. It's all frustrating. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans like me. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. You'll get 100% authentic tickets delivered to you on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. I pull up on Game Time, and in just a couple clicks, I get amazing deals. We're talking your favorite NFL games as low as $75, and the app makes it super simple. Show you your exact view before you buy the seat, and you can get zone deals as well. Pick the section, Game Time picks the seats, and you save big. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's the promo code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go download Game Time today. I'm super fired up about the new jeans and shirt that I just got from Duer. I had heard the most amazing things about the jeans in particular, and now that I've had a chance to wear them, all those amazing things have proven to be true. They're antibacterial, meaning your jeans stay fresh longer so you can wear more and wash less. And they keep you cool and comfortable as the temperatures change. Duer combines classic jeans wear with the type of comfort and performance you get from athletic wear. Best of the both worlds. Designed to look great and stay comfortable all day, no matter what you're doing. And Duer's the pioneers of blending technical innovation with everyday clothing. Simply put, Duer makes the world's most comfortable pants without having to sacrifice style. Go now to shopduer.com/LockedOnSeattle and you'll get 15% off your first order. That's shopduer.com/LockedOnSeattle for 15% off. Shopduer.com/LockedOnSeattle. Welcome back to Blue Friday here on Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host, Nick Lee. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. And for your second listen, don't forget to check out Locked On NFL twice a day. Our good friend Tyler Rowland from Locked On Titans dishing out all the insight and analysis you're looking for in the first episode. And then Tony Wiggins of Locked On Jaguars from the barbershop. you're not going to get better football breakdowns than you're going to get from Tony Wiggins. Second episode, Locked On NFL. You can listen to the podcast on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. So make Locked On NFL your second listen. All right, Nick, we've got Seahawks Titans coming up in Nashville Sunday afternoon. I guess you could say morning in the Pacific Northwest. A big game for both teams, even though the Titans at 1-9 are well out of the playoff hunt. They're battling for that number 1 draft pick once again in Nashville. It's a road game. Teams don't give games up and just bag it in. The Titans players are going to be looking to win. Seahawks want to bounce back from that tough game against the Rams they fell just short of on Jason Myers' 61-yard field goal. So let's get to our picks to click on offense. I had another week. Defense did not pan out for me, but offense, A.J. Barner ended up leading the team in receptions. So that one worked out fairly well for me. But let's get to our picks to click on that side of the football on offense. And I know normally we try to avoid picking the quarterback for this, but you made a compelling argument before the show started why you wanted to go that direction.
Well, first shout out to Brooke Cursosimo of NFL.com, who in our preview, we were kind of in lockstep with this reference. Ted Lasso, one of my favorite all-time shows, just such a good, heartwarming show. There's a scene where there's a soccer player, Sam Obisanya, who's having a rough go. You know, he's kind of got some things get away from him and clearly in his own head, disappointed, kind of beating himself up about mistakes. Ted calls him over as a good coach he is and says, hey, you know, he asks him, you know what the happiest animal on earth is? It's a goldfish, because he's got a 10-second memory. And he looks at him and goes, Sam, be a goldfish. And this Sam Darnold, needs a 10-second memory. Be a goldfish, Sam. Forget about what happened against the Rams. And I think he does. I think this is a great rebound area for him. He leads the NFL in passing yards per attempt. The Titans rank 28th in yards per pass attempt allowed. I think he gets another 100-plus passer rating game back on track. 0 interceptions. Be a goldfish, Sam. Big game for Sam Darnold.
Yeah, he can be the goldfish, and then we can have the pelican on the outside, referencing Finding Nemo here. Look, Jackson Smith-Njigba, he's been good for 100-plus yards pretty much every game this year. He's already established the team record for the most 100-yard games in a season, and we still got 7 games to go. I don't sleep on any team in the NFL, the any given Sunday mantra, but this is the corners that Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to be going up against in this game. Jalen Armour Davis, who's given up 2 touchdowns, has no picks this year, 120-plus QB rating. He's their number 1 corner right now with the injuries and trades they've made. Darrell Baker Jr. might not even play. He's questionable. He's their other outside corner. If he doesn't play, it's either going to be Micah Robinson or they're going to have Samuel Womack playing in the outside. 2 guys that have barely played any snaps in the National Football League. And even the slot, Marcus Harris is a rookie that's had his share of issues. Like, no offense, but this is a practice squad caliber cornerback group. Jackson Smith-Njigba has carved up all pros at times this year. I think JSN is going to go absolutely off. I wouldn't be shocked if he goes for 180-plus in this game. Maybe he gets to 200 in this game. I could see this being a classic like the maybe not the Julio Jones against the Atlanta Falcons back in the day, but I could see this being a game that he absolutely eats because I don't know who's covering him in that secondary. So I'm going to go 176 in the receiving yards category with a couple touchdown receptions for JSN. I do not think that this Titans team is going to have an answer for him. Let's go to the defensive side of the football now, going up against Cam Ward and company, all the injuries we mentioned that they're dealing with on that side of the football. And you mentioned some forced fumble possibilities earlier. That opens the door for a couple candidates potentially for the Seahawks here for pick to click.
Well, I mentioned that Cam Ward has had trouble with that as well. And Leonard Williams, I think he's going to eat Lloyd Cushenberry, the center, for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I just think that that's going to be an issue for the Titans. Kevin Zeitler and Peter Skoronski are actually okay guards. They've had their issues. Zeitler, I think, is past his peak, obviously, and Skoronski, I think, is one of their stronger linemen. But Cushenberry has not been great at center, and Leonard Williams is just an absolute animal. He's a cat, of course. I'm gonna call for him the big cat, of course. 2 sacks and a strip sack, one of them being a strip sack in plus territory, setting up an easy Seahawks touchdown that kind of breaks the will of the Titans early. So give me 2 sacks, one of it being of the strip sack variety for the Big Cat.
Yeah, I'm going to go to the secondary because Cam Ward has only thrown 6 picks, but he's got one of the higher turnover-worthy play rates in the National Football League, and this is going to be maybe the most ferocious pass rush. Maybe the Titans or the Texans that they've played against earlier this year, but this is up there with the most ferocious pass rush that he has gone against. And I just have a feeling those guys up front, with how last week ended, are going to have a little more on their shoulders this week. And so I actually think on the back end, this is going to be a game where there's opportunities. If you get the pressure early, especially with the injuries at wide receiver, Rick Woolen still does not have a pick. I think he gets 2 of them in this game. I think he doubles his past this year. I mean, he's been playing better football as of late. He gave him a touchdown last week, and then he really bottled up Devontae Adams after that. I thought he played really well in the second half. I think he gets a big, massive game with a couple of turnovers, maybe another pass breakup for good measure. I just think that Cam Ward's going to get pressured enough that he isn't going to be able to think about, I don't really want to pick on this guy. I just want to get rid of the football. And I think Rick Woolen's going to make him pay a couple times in this one and have the best game he's had in a couple of years for the Seahawks in this matchup. With that in mind, you and I are both thinking some kind of gaudy stat lines here. How does that play out in terms of score? And I know that you and I both are subscribers. We get it, any given Sunday, that you don't overlook a team. And I will say this, if Seattle overlooks Tennessee, the Titans can absolutely make this a close game. They've done it with a few other teams that were better than them this year. So you've got to show up. I just find it really hard to believe that Seattle's going to fall into that trap this week after how last week played out. I think they badly want to get that taste out of their mouth.
I'd be weirdly more worried about this game if the Seahawks had beaten the Rams. Does that make sense?
I think you and I would be in agreement on that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that the Seahawks are going to go in there pretty grumpy. The Titans they lost their last 2 games by combined 10 points. So they have been competitive, but I don't think the Chargers or the Texans got what the Seahawks got. And I think the Seahawks can break their will early. Cam Ward has kind of been playing with one arm and leg tied behind his back with his lack of support around him, the coaching turmoil and all that stuff. I mean, I think he still can be a fine player in this league. He just has no help. And I think the Seahawks defense is so good that they're going to kind of break the will of the offense for the Titans. And I am calling my shot, Corbin. I'm saying the Seahawks defense keeps them out of the end zone completely and just resorts them to 4 field goals. And I love scoregami. This is not a scoregami. In fact, it happened last week, Pittsburgh Steelers against the Bengals. But that was only the second time ever before 1995. And that is 34-12 is the score I'm picking. The Seahawks win this game and keep the Titans completely out of the end zone.
I'm going to give the Titans a touchdown in the second half when things have gotten kind of away from them already. I think they'll find a way to get a rushing touchdown in this game and put up 16. But I thought about even making the spread a little bigger than this because I just think Seattle is going to be in a bad mood in this game. I really do. 37-16 is what I'm going with. So a commanding win, similar score to what we saw against Arizona a few weeks back. And honestly, Tennessee is not near as good of a team. I know they beat Arizona earlier this year, but the Cardinals beat themselves in that football game bad. No, you don't want to take that away from Tennessee, but man, Arizona they Plaxico burst.
That was historic.
Game. Yeah, it was that was we want you to take this game from us. So here it is, Tennessee. Seattle's not going to do that in this game. So I think they get this done fairly comfortably. Again, you don't sleep on anybody in this league. And I could see Tennessee, if everything falls in line, we know how this league goes. I just don't think it happens. I think Seattle is going to prevent that from happening, and they're ready to go out and play. So I think this is going to be a commanding bounce-back win to get to 8-3. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Nick at Nick Lee 51. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you do not miss a single episode. Coming up on Sunday, we got Turbo hosting Squad Show this week immediately after the game, so make sure to join him and Rob Rang and company as they dive in with their immediate insight coming out of what's hopefully a Seahawks win. And I will have my weekly post-game show a few hours after the final whistle in Nashville. You won't want to miss either one of those. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. Go Hawks.